in the age of social media, it's very easy if you are the maintainer of a project to go out there and say something and it to be maybe accurate but abrasive. Um, and as an open source project, this is something about GNOME that people don't understand. Like, GNOME is not a company. Like, GNOME can't fire people. I mean, no. So there's the GNOME Foundation, which is an organization that has a handful of employees that like manage the legal side of things. But like the people developing your favorite GNOME app or whatever feature are generally not employed by the GNOME Foundation or GNOME itself, as a company. And so
To be fair, you could get banned
it's
from the GitLab if you were abrasive enough.
right, but it's like, okay, if they're saying things that are, abrasive on social media, that's a bummer, and we can, there's a code of conduct committee, and like if they're actually violating the code of conduct. But a lot of times the being abrasive is not against the code of conduct,
Mm-hmm.
like being a jerk, if it's not targeting individuals and harassing people, like being mean in itself is not strictly against the code of conduct, if that makes sense. Which
Sure.
like and also there's so many social media platforms and so many people in the GNOME that contribute to GNOME that like you can't possibly like laser eye monitor everything that everybody says on social media, and you're like, we wouldn't want to. But it just means like sometimes you'll have somebody with a either whether it's an ego thing or just they just have an abrasive personality, or I like to tell people like they're so tired. Like maintainers of open source, doesn't matter who it is, like maintainers are so tired and burnt out that like sometimes your BS threshold is just really low.
Yeah.
Like so you just will like call somebody out about something on social media, and from the outside, if you're like, see, gnome people mean, and it's like, yeah, okay,
We don't
yes.
just have to bring up GNOME.
Should that person have said that?
I'm sure the same thing is
Maybe
true with
not.
like Linus. Like Linus has
Oh yeah, yeah, 100%.
thousands of people that are trying to talk to him every single day. And when he
Yeah.
just like when he has like an email, it's like, no, this is wrong, you're stupid, this is wrong, stop it, stop it, stop it. And like I get it. It makes sense.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
it's totally understandable why he just seemingly randomly just explodes on people on the mailing list.
Right. Yeah, it's like, okay, there's been other conversations, there's been other like they've been doing this for a long time. They're tired, they're burnt out, they're whatever. And so it's hard. You want to balance the like, okay, it's really powerful to have your contributors of open source projects be out there sharing what they're working on to social media. That's great for your project, but also like rein it in sometimes, I think. Like, yeah, maybe it's not a good idea to be out there and saying like, I hate people that comment this on bug trackers. It's like, yeah, okay, I understand that that's your opinion and that's how you feel, but like people are going to see that. They're going to see it out of context. It's going to either like reinforce their existing idea of gnome people bad or whatever project is mean or whatever, even if you're not being like actually abusive or actually, super inflammatory. It's just the more it's hard because the more visibility you have into to the maintainers and how things work, like the less of a filter there is, and it can reinforce stereotypes and opinions, I think. But on the
I
flip side, you can't really like control that. If you're a company, you totally can. You can
oh
be
sure,
like,
yeah.
hey, if you're posting about our product on social media, like you need to stick to the talking points or whatever. And in open source, you don't always get that, and it's a positive and a negative, I think.
I don't remember which social media platform was experimenting with it, but I thought it was a really good idea where they'd use some like magical AI language model stuff, and if the post got flagged as like potentially controversial, there'd be like
Mm.
a timer before it would get posted. So it'd be like
Yeah, I've seen
10
this.
seconds,
Yeah.
20 seconds, whatever. And it's like if you have like it's really easy to post something you like read something really inflammatory. It's like I don't know, GNOME, this specific GNOME developer, you're a bad person or whatever, and you want to like fight back straight away, and it's very
Yeah,
easy
yeah.
to write something, just post it. But if there is that delay there, if there is like
Mm.
you know if you take 5 minutes, take a walk outside, come back in, you're like,
Yeah.
wait,
Yeah.
do I actually, like, is there anything productive that's going to happen from trying to fight with
Yeah.
this person on the internet? And the answer in almost every case is no. There are some
Yeah.
cases, sure, but most of the time, if it's just some random, like, anonymous account, no, probably not.
Yeah. That's the like the XKCD of like somebody on the internet is wrong or whatever. Like, uh, yeah, it's like you know what? Sometimes it is not worth your time and energy to try and correct everything. Like I get pulled into this too. Like I do it too, of like somebody will say something and it's wrong or they are missing context and I'm like I really want to correct them. Um, and it's hard. It's hard not to when you're like, no, maybe I can change their mind. 99% of the time, you're not going to change their mind. You're just going to tick them off, and you're gonna create an argument out of something that was just a random post.
Yeah.
And you're gonna raise the visibility of that argument, which is just going to reinforce people's existing opinions about something.
I think there are
Yeah,
cases
it's
where
hard.
people,
Yeah.
it's weird, right? Because there are people that are looking for a conversation, and there are people looking to argue, and
Yeah. Yeah.
because you can have some great conversations about whatever topic it happens to be. And if someone is willing to come to the table and look at what you're saying and empathize with your position and where you're coming from, you can actually, like, even through text, I've had some great conversations before, but identifying what that is, especially through text, versus someone who is specifically saying something to rile you up,
Yeah.
like, oftentimes the difference between those two are very subtle.
Yeah, sometimes people just want to have an argument, and like if you're gonna feed into that, you're just burning your own energy, um, and you're probably not making yourself or your project look good. Like even if you're right, like the fact that you're engaging in an argument in public on social media just looks bad.
Yeah.
Even if you're right, even if you're like 100% right, and I've had to tell people this too. Like there is, oh man, I don't want to call out the specific project, but I'm trying to even remember what it was. There was an open source project. So I remember now. But yeah, it's something that I like and I've used, and like I think technically the project is very interesting. And they have a habit of like causing drama or causing just like refuting anything
You're
and like
being very
overblowing.
generic here. I can think of like 20 different projects this would apply
Right,
to.
which is why I'm
Good
trying to
job.
make it generic to be like maybe
No,
you
good
maybe
job.
you can
actually
think of an
worked-
example.
You worked it out.
Like maybe you can think of an example of sometime this has happened in your own project or whatever, whoever's listening to this. But like the fact that they were engaging in these arguments, even though I think technically they were correct, but the fact that they were engaging in these arguments made the project look bad to me, and I was like, ooh, I don't know. Like, so that's that. I think that's hard to remember. Of like, it's like if you were gonna go out on the street and you were gonna like start shouting at somebody outside of their workplace, right? And like, or if somebody came to your workplace and they were like shouting at you from the street, it's like, okay, if you just ignore that, they're just the crazy person on the street shouting at the building, right? But if you come out of the building and you stand there in the street and you shout back at them, like you both just look like idiots. Like even if you're right, even if that person is totally in the wrong and they're shouting at you and they're crazy and you have every factual point and you can counterpoint everything that they're saying, you still look like two people yelling at each other on the street. And I think the social media is the same way of like sometimes just getting in a public argument's not worth it. Like that's when you can take it. You can take it privately. You can say, hey, I saw this post of yours. I thought that was interesting. If you wanted to discuss it or learn a little bit more, like I'm happy to talk to you about it. But like trying to like one up each other on social media or just like prove you're right on social media publicly. I just don't think it ever looks good.
Well, what it does is it tries to score points with the people who already agree with you. Like you're like let's just say there's like an argument between like a GNOME and KDE developer. The GNOME dev is arguing for this curated experience. The KDE dev is arguing for customizability. Like no one is going to come out of that and be like, hey, I was a supporter of GNOME. Oh yeah, I actually think that being able to customize is a good idea. Like no, what's going to happen is the people who support GNOME, they're going to like, yeah, GNOME's right. The people who support KDE, they're like, yeah, KDE's right. I'm going to be on the outside eating my popcorn and having fun laughing at both of you. And that's, I think, where most people are going to be.
Yeah, a lot of people are going to be like, wow, these open source projects, like, wow, they just like to argue a lot. I can't believe that they just yell at each other in public. Like, yeah, you're not doing yourself any favor there. And it's hard because it kind of goes back to the issue tracker, like, and maintainers being tired. Like, We've had this conversation in GNOME before of like it has been extremely powerful that our issue tracker is really accessible to anybody. Like
Mhm.
it lowers the barrier for reporting an issue, which is awesome when there's
I've
somebody who's
been
going to come and report an
very
issue.
critical of Bugzilla. I am an
Yeah.
avid disliker of Bugzilla. I
I
love the
think
fact that GNOME
yeah.
uses GitLab.
Yeah, same. I love it. Like I remember back when I first started contributing to GNOME and adjacent things, like if somebody told me to like send a patch or even like report an issue, it was like a whole thing. It was a huge pain. And platforms like GitLab make that way easier. They lower the barrier, they make them way more accessible.
Mhm.
But it has this kind of flip side of it also creates less of a barrier between like less of a barrier's not the right word, but less of a buffer, I guess, between the people working on the project and just randos on the internet.
This is an
Um,
argument I've heard about Linux and the mailing list. The mailing
mm,
list is a
mhm,
good filter because, you can
mm.
make a GitLab account because you can sign into the GNOME GitLab with your GitHub account, can't you?
I think so. There's like the
Yeah,
GNOME
yeah,
has
you
actually
can.
been fighting spam and stuff recently, where like you don't have as many permissions if you don't actually have a GNOME membership.
Right.
So there's like there are interesting things that you can do,
But like that,
but in
yeah.
general, like being able to just report an issue is really powerful. Like
Mhm.
that's nice to be able to report it. The
Yeah.
problem is when it's a mostly volunteer project, like every issue that is reported has to be addressed, and the energy you have to address every individual issue diminishes with the more issues that are that
Yeah.
are filed.
Yeah.
And yeah, like with the with Linux and the mailing list, like I've also heard that it's a huge like some of the workflow there is a huge pain and it is a real barrier to people to contribute who otherwise would contribute. And so it's hard. You have to kind of balance making it accessible and easy to actually onboard people in a way, but also not exposing your maintainers and your developers to just every piece of criticism that any rando wants to just anonymously or anonymously throw at them. It's hard, and I don't think anybody has a perfect solution to it. I think something that like I like the direction of, and I would be interested in GNOME doing more of, is that GNOME has a process for membership and like becoming a GNOME member, a member of the GNOME Foundation is a thing, and there's a threshold. You have to have done some sort of contribution to the project in the last couple of years, and then you have every 2 years it has to be renewed, and like it it creates some sort of a baseline to say, okay, if you have membership, like you probably can comment on anything on GitLab.
Mhm.
But if you don't have membership, if you just registered your account today or whatever, like maybe you're well intentioned, maybe maybe you're reporting a real issue, but there's a lot more volume of like spam and just vitriol or whatever, like just
Yeah.
just garbage.